Hey everyone, this is Misti-Dawn with the Manamal Streaming Radio, and I'm chatting it up with Mike and Brian from the band The Inoculated Canaries. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. How are ya?
Great. How are you?
Doing pretty well, thank you for asking. How are you, Brian?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Now, the first question I've got to ask, and I'm sure this is always probably the first question that gets asked, how did this name come about?
I'll take this one. Okay, so it's not like a super glamorous story or anything. I came up with it when I was in the 7th grade, so it was a really long time ago. And I was in science class, and we're just kind of like reading out of the textbook, whatever. And I wasn't paying attention because I'm a good student. And something about like inoculating canaries. I was like, wow, that's really weird. That would be a great band name. So that became the band name, and the cool part about it is it had the unintended consequence of search engine optimization. So if you Google us, we're the only thing for like 10 pages, and then it's a bunch of science textbooks. So it was like a win-win. And so far, all the radio play we've been getting, everybody's been saying, normally I don't check out new music, but the name was so weird I kind of had to. So it's been fortunate. People either love it or hate it. There's really no middle ground with it, which is fine with me. I don't really care.
Well, I think it's amazing. Like you said, when you type it in, of course, the first thing that pops up is you. So great strategy on your part for sure. Now, do any of the members from the band come from musical families?
Brian?
Yeah. My dad plays in his own band. He's already been like an music musician. He played in high school, started on sax, classically trained, and he's gotten more into guitar and singing. He's got his own kind of 60s acoustic cover band, and I think I got a lot of my musical influence from that. He first got me into playing music myself.
Now I know James his family doesn't play. Dylan's family doesn't really play either. As far as me, neither of my parents can play even remotely. But my grandfather actually, he's from Italy, and the whole reason he came to America was because he had a gig at Carnegie Hall. He was playing bass with his band that was like a wedding band in Italy, and somehow they ended up here. And while he was here, my grandmother got pregnant, and he was like, whatever, we'll just stay. So that was kind of the whole reason I ended up in America. Otherwise, I guess I would have been Italian. Maybe I'd learned 2 languages.
Nothing wrong with that. Now, I hear many nuances in your music. I hear Zeppelin, I hear The Doors, I hear Hendrix. Who are some of your musical influences?
This is such a complicated question because all 4 of us are really different. So me personally, I've always been like strictly classic rock. So it's been Zeppelin, it's been Floyd, it's been Steely Dan. Those are like my 3 favorites. And recently I've been listening to some newer stuff. I mean, Sublime's not really newer, but I've been listening to a lot of Sublime. I've been listening to a lot of Tame Impala. Brian has always been a music theater guy. And, my joke with him is that his favorite play is Rent, even though he absolutely hates Rent. But he has been playing in orchestras for years, which is why he's such a good piano player. James had not heard Stairway to Heaven before I met him. So James was not into Led Zeppelin, not into none of that. It was just like a completely just untapped world for him. For him, it was Green Day, Blink-182, and Sum 41, and that was the whole world. And Street Fight Manifesto and like Real Big Fish, and there was nothing else. And Dylan's kind of been all over the place, but Dylan has a lot of years. This is his first time being in a rock band. He's got a lot of years of experience playing upright bass in a jazz trio. So really weird kind of backgrounds that we all come from. Brian, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the cool part is you bring everybody together in rehearsal, and you can really hear each of those individual influences when we write a song and we put our twist on it. And you can hear the musical theater, you can hear Dylan's jazz, you can hear your classic rock, and it all kind of comes together. This really weird, but really cool, amalgamation sound. I think that's one of the coolest things about us.
Now, you did say something about that one band member was into jazz. Now, do the rest of you do anything like that? Because I thought I read an article that said you were all into jazz at one point.
I love listening to it, but I can't play it. which is kind of unfortunate. It's just never something that I got into playing. But I love Miles Davis. I love John Coltrane. Brian, I'm sure you're also super into jazz. I mean, I hear a lot of jazz whenever you play.
Yeah, I definitely have the jazz influence. I played in a jazz band back in high school. I haven't done much playing since, but always been a fan and try to incorporate a lot into my theater work as well.
I mean, I think apart from like top 40 pop, there's really nothing that I don't like. I mean, I refuse to listen to top 40 pop. James always sits me down and forces me to do it because, there's some good hooks in there, but I can't stand like stuff you hear on Z100, which I don't know if it's a radio station you have out there, but God. Anyway.
Now your sound is super unique, and it's for me it's very refreshing. It's not like I'm gonna hear anything else out there what you're doing right now. Who all are involved in the songwriting process, or do you all contribute?
It's really all of us. I mean, I think I lead it a bit, so I'll come in with lyrics and music and kind of a general outline. But regardless of what I come in with, it always gets kind of morphed by the other guys in the band. I don't think the product would be what it is if it weren't for the other three guys. So it's nothing is 100% one person's, and I think we all kind of put our little spin on it. For instance, like I had a song where just recently, as it's probably going to be on our next EP, I was totally thinking of it as like a folk kind of thing, which is kind of weird for us because we haven't done that. But as soon as I started playing it, James was like, okay, punk rock. And then we were kind of halfway into it, and I was like, you know what, this is way better. So the character of the song completely changed. And that's something that I wouldn't have done myself. And it's just one example. I mean, the other three guys do it on absolutely everything. So it's shared in that way. But I think I write most of the lyrics. And I rely on Brian a lot because he has a much better understanding of music theory than I do. So in order to kind of arrange stuff and communicate parts and maybe come up with more interesting bridges than what I can come up with, I really rely on Brian for that. And he's really good at that. So not to hype you up too much, Brian.
He likes it. Now, your first EP, The Blue Laws, was pretty great. How long after this EP did you release Trying Times?
A while, and the reason for that is because the band had changed. So when the Blue Laws came out, Brian wasn't in the band, James wasn't in the band, and Dylan wasn't in the band. So I'm the only one that was there for both. I was 13 when that came out, so it was a really long time ago. Right after it happened, kind of because we were all little kids, everybody's parents wanted one thing or another, and if the parents got involved, and we're little kids, we don't know what we're doing. So. And then one kid ended up going to college. One kid just wanted to smoke weed all day and not, play any music. And then another kid was just like, whatever, I'm getting bored. So we went from having, a full band, which was that setup, to now it was just kind of me and I had to find people. And luckily, James was the first guy I found. I ran into James. And then Brian and Dylan I've been working with at School of Rock for years now. So it was kind of just natural. But it was a few years between the two, simply because I had to try to find the right people, and I think needed to find people that were a little bit older because it's kind of tough to have a professional band when you're 14,
Right, I hear ya. Now this EP is super eclectic, and my two favorites, albeit that I love them all, I love Jericho and Prisoner. If you had to pick any of your songs off of this EP, what would be your favorite song?
Brian?
That's a hard one. I mean, there's something about all of them that I like. I think I would have to say that Jericho was probably my favorite, just because I think it shows really great versatility. I mean, Count Me Out, it's a great opening track. It's really in your face, upbeat rock, and then we turn it completely around. We have this really nice kind of power ballad feel. And I don't know, there's something about that just really shows, I think, our flexibility and your flexibility, Mike, as a songwriter. It's something really different.
Thanks, Brian. I don't know. I think my favorite one to play is Count Me Out. I don't know if that's necessarily my favorite one to listen to, but on the topic of them all being really different, that was partly by design, partially because when I go to a show, unless it's like a reggae show or something like that. So I went to go see Real Big Fish with James, obviously. I went to go see Bad Fish, which is the Sublime cover band, which I would have liked to have seen Real Sublime, but unfortunately, he died before I was born. And that's kind of a different thing. I think you could sit through a 2-hour Sublime show, 2-hour reggae set, and it's a lot of fun. But for me, going to a different kind of rock band, it gets kind of boring listening to one genre of music for 2 hours. Like, I like Foreigner and I like Boston a lot, but I couldn't listen to 2 hours of it. So for me, I really wanted to focus on just doing as many different things as we can, partially because it's more interesting to listen to because you don't know what we're going to come out with next, and partially because, there's the cliche of, I liked a band when they did their old stuff better. Well, if the old stuff was everything that we could possibly think of doing, then the new stuff is all related to the old stuff because we've already done all of these different genres. So if in our second album or something we write a ska song and a jazz song on the same record, later we have full license to do both because we did it earlier at one point. So nobody can say, I like the old stuff better, because it is the old stuff, because our old stuff is intentionally different.
That's a very genius thing to do, though. I mean, and to be able to have that much variety with the different influences is, like I said, it's refreshing. You don't hear it. You don't turn it on the radio and hear anything like you. So I'm anxious to get,
people say, what do you sound like? We're like, I don't really know. Or it's hard trying to find radio stations to play us because, if we're, if we're a punk rock band, okay, there's a punk segment. If we're a metal band, okay, there's a metal segment. Especially here I live in Queens, but we've done a lot of shows in Long Island. Long Island loves metal, and we're not really metal. So it's kind of tough for us to find a fit. We're like alternative rock, but nowadays alternative rock is just a little bit softer than I think we are. Plus, in all of our stuff, you have stuff like Take a Look Around, which is kind of like Billy Joel-ish. And then you have stuff like Count Me Out, which is, people say it sounds like that ZZ Top song, which we didn't realize until after we recorded and mastered it. And we were like, oh yeah, I guess it's similar to LaGrange, the riff. But, I don't know. It's cool, but it's definitely not made our lives easy.
Now that you're talking about Count Me Out, the video for this is so colorful. I love it. It snags you, then it reels you in, and it keeps you watching. Now, was this your personal concept, or was this,
Yes, we did absolutely everything. We filmed it, we edited it. It was our ideas. We painted each other's faces. It was us. I think my mom helped out, and like 2 or 3 other people that we work with that are a little bit better at art than we are. But that's kind of it.
Was very creative, and like I said, the concept was really, really good. Now, other than finding stations to play your music, what has been the biggest challenge for your band?
Brian, you want to weigh in on this one? I got to think about it for a second.
Well, I don't know if it's so much a challenge now, but I think that perhaps one of our big challenges has just been getting accustomed to each other as a new band, just because we were all new members at one point, and just trying to really get a handle on what the sound we were looking for was, to incorporate all of our influences in a way that made sense. When you have 4 people that are so diverse musically, you run the risk of coming together to make a song, and it ends up a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and it kind of sounds haphazard. So I think part of the challenge was getting us to mesh all of that together in a way that's cohesive and really gives us a characteristic sound. And I think now that we've been working together for a lot longer, I think that's less of an issue. And I think we're really starting to understand each other and where we come from in that regard.
Yeah, I think you're right, Brian. For me especially, it's been hard. Pretty much there was a period of time where every year the band was a completely different group of people. There was one point where we had 2 female singers actually before we don't have any recordings. There's videos, but there's no studio stuff. That was before I was a singer of the band. I was just lead guitar, and then we had a rhythm guitar player. We had a bunch of different bassists, and going through, you have a certain chemistry with a group of people when you've been playing with them for like a year, and then it's a completely different group, and you spend a year building up that chemistry again, and then they leave. So that was happening for a really long time. But I think the good thing now is I've worked with these guys for a really long time, and they're simultaneously my best friends and my arch enemies because of how much time we spend together, especially James. Freaking James. James is the butt of every joke. You should just know that, and he's cool with it. That's the dynamic of the band. That's why if you watch the "Don't Be Late" video, which was from a while ago, he's dressed as like an old lady because he had to be. There's definitely that, and also kind of like I was saying before, finding where we fit, finding our niche, because we can't. There's a band like Greta Van Fleet, right? I'm sure you've heard of them. Yes. Which they're awesome, and they sound a lot like Led Zeppelin. So for them, it's really easy to say, oh, you like Led Zeppelin? You'll like us. A punk rock band, you like Green Day, you like The Strokes, you'll like us. For us, we got to hand people a list of 30 different bands. And if you like some of these, you might like us. And if you don't one song, you might like a different song because they don't really sound similar necessarily. It's just my voice that's the consistency between all the songs. So getting used to constantly having a new band, which now I think we're pretty rock solid. I think this formation is going to be here for a while, and I hope it is because this is one of the strongest that we've had. And also, like I was saying, trying to find out where we fit. But I think we're getting there, and I think as our name starts to get out there, people kind of get what we do now.
It's nice. I mean, for you not to conform to what other people want is wonderful in itself. I mean, you're being you, you're being true to you, and that's amazing. That's a great job. Great job.
Thank you.
I saw a video where you covered Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, and it was super awesome. And I just wondered, who decides what covers you do? Is it a group effort?
Oh, 1,000%. Right? Yeah, Brian, you want to?
No, I mean, especially in our recent covers, we're trying to think of stuff, that we can really make our own at the same time, like reaching out to people broadening and it's like, okay, what are people going to want to hear, and how can we, make it a true Canaries cover? What can we do to really make it special? And so we're working on a couple of different covers right now. I don't want to give anything away, but I think that what we've done with them, you can very clearly see the influence of all four of us in the way that we chose to rearrange it. It was absolutely a group effort, and we sat down and we said, I think this would work really well. Let's try this in the chorus. Let's put a solo here. And that whole cut and paste arranging process was absolutely a group effort, and I think that it shows in the finished product.
Absolutely. There was a large period of time where we did a lot of covers kind of straight. So, we would do the classics, we do Purple Haze, we do, other Jimi Hendrix stuff, other Zeppelin stuff. And the reason for that is because, when we're still a new band and nobody knows us, you go to a show, it's tough to get people to sit through 2 hours of originals that they've never heard before. So you throw out a cover that everyone knows, and it kind of alleviates the audience, and then they're kind of really interested in what you have to do again. But as we've been growing, and as kind of we've been getting out there, and as, like I was saying before, as people start to know what we do, the covers that we do now are really our interpretations of them, which is what we like to do. I mean, we're not a cover band. Not that there's anything against cover bands. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are fantastic musicians that make a living, playing other people's songs, which is fine. I mean, I've seen a bunch. I think it's cool. But that's not what we do, and our thing is, how creative can we get with a good piece of music? There are songs that we are covering now that the originals I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, which is partly why we're covering them, because they have good hooks, they have good chord progressions, and we're like, you know what? If we could take those and do them in a rock setting, they'd be good songs. Also, Brian is singing a couple of them, which on none of the studio stuff Brian has sang yet. But Brian actually has a fantastic voice. I even think he might be a better singer than I am. But so stay tuned for that.
Aww. Now, if you guys had the opportunity to collaborate with any artist, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Frank Zappa.
Well, that was quick.
Who else would I possibly pick? I think he's the pinnacle of 1,000 years of composers, going back from like Beethoven and Bach, because he's not like a rock star. He's a composer. If you listen to all the stuff that he does, it's classical music. It's just his interpretation of it is with electric guitars and with drums. But he has crazy woodwind sections, and he's just the most original. I mean, he died in 1994, 1996. I think it was pancreatic cancer. It was some kind of cancer. They still put out an album every single year of stuff that he's made because he has so much music, because he has so many good ideas. I mean, to have that kind of, the only person I can think of that has that many albums and is that creative is Prince. Definitely Frank Zappa. He's been a huge inspiration for me, even though some of his stuff I think is awful and I can't listen to. A lot of it is just absolute genius, and just the quantity that he made is unreal. Brian, what about you?
I think I'd have to say Freddie Mercury.
Oh.
That's the one too.
Yes.
so many great things. I mean, obviously it was a full band effort, but he led it, all the writing, all the crazy theatrics, the harmonies. Like, a lot of that is where I get my influence from. And I think it would just be such a cool experience, just even be a fly on the wall in the studio watching them record, all their greatest hits. I think that would be incredible to watch.
Did you guys know Brian May has a PhD? I think it's in astrophysics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Now, if you had one song to choose that you feel captures the essence of the band, what would it be?
Of one of our songs?
Yes.
Oh, man. Brian?
One of our songs that captures our essence.
Yes.
I think I would probably say "Count Me Out" because it has the energy that we bring to the table, but like you can also see a lot of the influences coming together, and I think just the attitude that the song gives off is kind of similar to where we stand as a band. It's in your face. It's here we are, not apologizing for what we are, what we sound like. Like this is us. That's the vibe I get from that song.
Yeah, I think I might have to say "Count Me Out" too, just because a lot of that was improvised, because it was pretty much a live recording apart from vocals and bass. We did drums, guitar, and keys live because at the time there was only 3 of us. Most of our show, I think, is improvised. All the solos are improvised. Sometimes we'll turn around to the band and be like, "Yo, guys, do this," and then it'll kind of change. So I think for that reason, probably "Count Me Out." But I'd also say Jericho, because I think we're kind of a stadium band, or we haven't played at stadiums, but I think we would fit that environment well, rather than like a small club or something. And I think that every time I listen to that song, to me, it sounds like it was recorded in a stadium, and I think that's partly our producer's fault. Dave Caggiano, he did an amazing job, and all the reverb and all the mixing that he did on it makes that track sound like it's in Madison Square Garden, even though we recorded it in a basement. So I don't know, definitely between those two.
Now, do you guys have any shows coming up that you could share with the listeners today?
So the next one that we have is in Wildwood, which is July 6th, I believe. It's on Maurice Pier. I don't know what time the show is. They're going to tell us when we get closer to the day. But it's going to be later in the day, probably like after 6 o'clock. That's the next one we've got coming up. So if you're in Jersey, come check it out.
Wildwood, New Jersey. Okay, well, is there anything else you'd like to say to your fans and our listeners that we may not have covered today?
Brian?
I guess I just want to say, thanks for listening. Thanks for, giving us a shot. I think that we're a really cool band. We're very different from a lot of the stuff that's out right now. And, as someone who's making music, I appreciate people who are always willing to give music a chance. So thank you for that. And we're going to be making it for you as long as you listen. So.
True. I have to say something along similar lines, just because, we're not good at writing stuff that we don't really care about. I can only, I don't write 50, 60 songs at a time. I'll only write one or two at a time, and it'll take me a while just because I can only write stuff I really care about. So the fact that I pour a lot of time into pretty much a rather small quantity of music and that people really like it, and counting out the video as like 75,000 views, which I don't know, we were stoked when it was at 30. We never thought it would get past that. So to everybody that listens and to everybody that digs this stuff, especially because it's kind of weird and a little bit from left field, I mean, just thank you guys so much, and really appreciate it, because the whole reason we do it is so you guys can listen to it. So thanks.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today. It's been a pleasure. For our listeners, be sure to check